On this Tuesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, the Memphis Grizzlies of Summer League fame are dominating people. Another blowout victory, this time against the Dallas Mavericks. I'll talk to you about what are some positives and negatives of that development, plus Ziaire Williams on the trading block. Lots of fun stuff to discuss on this Tuesday show. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is a wonderful Tuesday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, in part because the Summer League Grizzlies, even though Zach Edey isn't playing and Cam Spencer rolls his ankle and leaves early, another impressive performance. We'll talk about why that was, why that wasn't, and what could be coming down the pike as the Summer League ends and the offseason continues for Memphis on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, your host for this episode, flying solo this time around. No to Michael Cole, the commercial appeal in Memphis, Tennessee. He will be flying solo to close out the week on Friday as I go on a little long weekend with the fam. But I've got you tonight and today. And whenever you're checking out this podcast, I am with you, and hopefully you're with me here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs finish up. Summer League finishes up here in the next several days. Sports stuff, sportsing like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Like, comment, rate, review, especially subscribe. YouTube continues to have wonderful numbers and continues to be a big part of our growth here on Locked On Grizzlies. But make sure you're checking out the audio side. Make sure you're subscribing over at Apple, over at Spotify, over at Amazon. Take us with you wherever you go, and every time an episode drops of Locked On Grizzlies, hopefully at this stage you are an everydayer hanging out with us each and every time. What an interesting time to be alive, right? What an interesting time to enjoy Summer League basketball, because the Memphis Grizzlies look dominant. And this is one of the positives, dear listener, dear viewer, of the garbage basketball that you and I had to watch at the end of the last regular season. It is a positive because the guys that are currently playing Summer League basketball, a lot of them played a heck of a lot of end of regular season basketball. And what that has led to is a kind of continuity, a kind of chemistry, a kind of tenacity within scheme, especially defensively, that you usually do not get in Summer League. Jake LaRavia has officially hit too good for Summer League levels. He looked impressive. He is affecting winning in so many different ways. We're going to talk about later on in the show one very important way that G.G. Jackson continues to not impact winning. He impacted winning in other ways too, to give him his credit. But for me, if I had to choose between LaRavia and Gigi, I'm picking LaRavia to sit out for the rest of summer. Because obviously Memphis could care less, right? Zach Edey continues to not play. Imagine if Edey had played in this game. Memphis might have won by 50. The reality is Summer League is not significant. I wish Zach Edey would have played for Team Canada at this point. That's fine. He's there with Memphis. They're taking care of him. That's great. Again, as I said on yesterday's show, my beef with that is there's an Olympics going on. If it was the 2025 Summer League and Zach Edey was doing this, I could care less. But I digress. Jake LaRavia looks too good for Summer League. He looks like a guy who belongs on this roster, maybe not in the rotation, but as a depth piece, somebody gets injured, he can come in, help keep the wheels spinning on this Grizzly season upcoming that needs to have some wins, right? We've talked about that a lot, and we'll continue to do so here on Locked On Grizzlies. Jake LaRavia facilitated, Jake LaRavia especially defended. And one of my favorite things watching the Summer Grizzlies is how they pick up almost every single possession, full court pressure defense on the point of attack. And I think that is a point of emphasis we've talked about in the past, going all the way back to Desmond Bane, going into year 2 of his career playing Summer League, and how Bane was asked to be the point guard, the lead facilitator. It would seem to this layman's eye, this pseudo media member, however you want to phrase me, this fanboy, watching these games, one of their points of emphasis is intensifying the defensive pressure. You see it from Jake LaRavia, 4+ steals in the last couple of games. You see it from Scotty Pippen Jr., who is a monster in that area. They have forced so many turnovers in Las Vegas. It's like they're opening up a bakery next to wherever the Grizzlies are staying, and Memphis is cooking up some delicious peach and pastry treats. That's how many turnovers have been created by the Grizzlies Summer League roster led by head coach Jason March. It's a point of emphasis. They are developing that skill set. They are putting opposing teams in a blender. You cannot, with a lack of chemistry, execute some of the schemes and some of the looks, especially defensively, that Memphis is implementing. You can't do it. If you're not familiar with how to right a wrong, cover for someone's mistake, if you don't understand the scheme in and out, you are not going to be in a place to be able to educatedly gamble like the Grizzlies do at times in their current pressing situation. They're aggressive. They're competitive. They want to get out early and get out fast. I think Memphis, it was something like 17-3 or something along those lines to start the game. The game was over almost in the first 5 minutes. And a lot of it had to do with the way that Memphis was playing defense. And what has been my MO this entire conversation about Summer League? I want to see guys thrive and have success in ways that they can contribute in an actual regular season game next to the Memphis Grizzlies. The real ones, the John Morants and the Desmond Banes and the Jaren Jackson Jr.'s. Jake LaRavia has shown to me he can do that. 7-some assists against the Mavs. He can facilitate offense. He can find cutters. He can find guys on the perimeter in space. He is showing growth in his game beyond just that sweet shooting stroke that we've talked about in the past. Scotty Pippen Jr., somebody on X made it sound like we should count on Derrick Rose to be the facilitator of offense that GG Jackson can't be, as a little preview of what's to come here on the show. And hopefully we can all agree that Derrick Rose doesn't touch the court in a healthy Memphis Grizzlies rotation, right? Maybe that's something I'll save for DeMichael. I know he loves Derrick Rose for understandable reasons growing up in Memphis. But Derrick Rose shouldn't sniff the court in a healthy Grizzlies rotation going into next season. Shouldn't come close. I would much rather see Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Vince Williams Jr. Heck, I'd rather see Luke Kennard, assuming he will resign. I would rather see Scotty Pippen Jr. for the 50 games that he gets of his G League contract, his two-way deal up with Memphis, before I'd see Derrick Rose. I'm not saying waive Derrick Rose. I'm saying he shouldn't play on the floor as long as this rotation is healthy, as long as these players are healthy. Scotty Pippen Jr. has earned that. He has shown the capacity to compete and do those things. The Grizzlies are off until tomorrow, Wednesday, no game. They have back-to-back coming up, right? Wednesday, Thursday. So I'm sure there will be some roster shenanigans that go on over the next couple of days. Who knows? Maybe Zach Edey will play. The Grizzlies keep insisting that Edey is trying to play again in Summer League. It feels like a carrot being led in front of the donkey, trying to lead the plow on the farm. But sure, I'll bite. Take a bite of the carrot. Say Edey plays on Wednesday. Maybe they rest a couple of these other guys, and then Edey most certainly would not play on Thursday in that situation. I don't think Edey's going to play again. But he may not need to. And that's, again, my frustration goes back to the Team Canada stuff. I'm frustrated for him, even though it sounds like he made the choice and it's his life and his career. You might think you have plenty of opportunities to play in the Olympics. That's not necessarily the case. And while Memphis is having success in Summer League, and we've seen positives from Edey, not seeing more from him is one of my disappointments so far. And it's wild to say that out loud with a Grizzlies team that has dominated both of their Summer League contests. But again, what is happening in Vegas is not as important as how it's going to contribute to what goes on in Memphis 3 and 4 months from now. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will talk about, conspicuous by his absence in the opening segment, Mr. GG Jackson, who did really well scoring the basketball, but like we've talked about here before, we know GG can score. There's something that he did really well that I'd like to see more of and continue to see growth. And you could probably predict, if you're an everydayer, something that he didn't do as well. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die car alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts to choose from for your number one ride or die. You will always find exactly what you're looking for. With the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die whip alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available for customers in the United States. When we return here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're talking the good and the bad of GG Jackson. Stick around. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax. Happy to have you with me wherever you're taking in the show, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing. I sound like a Debbie Downer right now, and I'm trying not to, dear listener, dear viewer. I'm being real with you. All I can be is real. That's what I've been since I started covering this team in 2013, going into year 12, goodness gracious, following the Memphis Grizzlies in a blogger, podcaster manner. All I can be is honest in what I see. And I see missed opportunity even within the fantastic 2-0 start. And if it didn't matter if the Grizzlies were 0-2 in Summer League, it doesn't matter if they're 2-0. Are they utilizing the tools at their disposal to make guys better for what's to come, right? I think with Jake LaRavia and Scotty Pippen Jr., it's a pretty unequivocal yes. They are improving. I could see those guys being helpers in a roster depletion situation via trade, via injury, whatever the case might be, right? I think that is a reasonable thing to say coming out of these several Summer League games that we've seen. I also think it's reasonable to say out loud that GG Jackson has been a mixed bag. Now, undoubtedly, there's going to be somebody in the comments and someone on social media when they catch wind of this show. I might start a firestorm. I have a habit of doing that. People are going to be mad at me over at Joe Mullinax and say, Joe, GG Jackson scored efficiently. He dominated, especially as the game went on. What in the world more do you want from this young man? And I think what I want more from this young man is exactly what I've been saying in terms of his ability to facilitate for others. In about 30 minutes of play against the Dallas Mavericks, he did not have a single assist. Not a one. Now, this is a guy who has scored the basketball in NBA games at a very high level, as well or better than most young 18, 19-year-old players have ever done in the NBA, except for a guy named LeBron James. That is not hyperbole. That is fact. I know that GG Jackson can score the basketball. I know that he can score the basketball in meaningless games. I watched it for weeks this past spring. Hopefully, GG Jackson is going to be a part of a rotation. I've argued for him as the sixth man, where he is going to be contributing to winning basketball. Just scoring a bunch of points, as random as it might sound to some, does not contribute to winning basketball. Something that GG Jackson does do pretty well, we'll talk about here in a moment, contributing to winning basketball, is rebound. We'll get to that. But I want to stay for another minute or so on this concept of him not having to be a passer, because I disagree. Because a lot of times the folks that say that GG Jackson doesn't have to be a passer, doesn't have to facilitate offense. Okay. Those are also hand in hand, oftentimes the folks that say that GG Jackson should be a starter on the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, first off, if Marcus Smart is on the Memphis Grizzlies, he is going to start. Period, full stop. You can disagree with that decision. I think I would argue for Vince Williams Jr. in front of Marcus Smart at this point, but I'm not going to be mad about it, A, from a basketball standpoint, and B, from a political standpoint within the confines of team chemistry. Marcus Smart is going to start if he is on this roster. So that leaves GG Jackson as a reserve, right? Unless you go small with Jaren at the 5, GG at the 4, which looks more promising coming out of Summer League, and I'll explain why here momentarily. Every time that GG Jackson is on the floor with John Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr., and he does not have the capacity to pass, facilitate, create offense for others, he is going to take shots away from one of John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane. In a way, it becomes a bizarro version of Jonas Valanciunas. What made Jonas the most effective during his time in Memphis is when the offense got stagnant, you threw him the ball, you let him work. But your best players were John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. And at that point, those are the guys that you were still working on trying to develop. Now it's G.G. Jackson who's the developmental piece. And if he cannot consistently create for others, like a John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., out of his isolation looks that he's going to get because of those dudes on the floor, he can't be a starter and he can't play alongside those guys. Doesn't mean he's not in the rotation. In my opinion, it adds credence to the argument that he should be the pseudo sixth man because he can be a scorer who doesn't play alongside those guys and can be more of a scoring threat and option without taking away offensive possibility from the Jaws and Baines and Jarens of the world. Another thing that makes that more possible is the positive that I want to take away from this game. And that is that G.G. Jackson was a heck of a rebounder, right? I believe he got a double-double in the contest, really impressive on the glass. And DeMichael and I have talked about here on the show the idea of G.G. as a 4 long-term. He is young enough and athletic enough that I think he can still defend threes. We saw Taylor Jenkins challenge G.G. Jackson in those last 6 or so weeks of the regular season. What can he do defensively? Put him out there. Let's see how he does. If you still have the opinion, if you're listening to this from a national standpoint, you want to check in, see how mad people were about Zach Edey, whatever the case might be. If you haven't watched G.G. Jackson lately, and you think that he's some sort of defensive sieve, you're wrong. Because he's not. That was one of the things that he got best at as the season went on. Again, everybody wants to talk about GG as a bucket. And they need a bucket getter. But what adds credence to the argument for GG as an eventual starter in Memphis as opposed to a reserve or a bench player is the fact that he is indeed able to defend multiple positions. And he's also able to rebound. We have talked here, there, and everywhere about how weak Jaren Jackson Jr. is as a rebounder more often than not. If you want to play 4 next to a small ball 5, Jaren Jackson Jr., and you are not a facilitator of offense, you are going to have to be a rebounder. And to be honest with you, from what I've seen from G.G. Jackson, I need to see it in an actual NBA game or 2 or 12. That is where he can close the most ground on Santi Aldama beyond defense. It's not like Santi Aldama is some amazing creator of offense. And the important distinction, I know we're in an era of positionless basketball. The important distinction for me is if you are playing the 4, say you've got Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Vince Williams Jr., G.G. Jackson, Zach Edey, right? Or even Jaren. I would go with Edey for the point that I'm trying to make. Who's your number 2 option, right? Number 2 option is probably G.G. Jackson. You're next to Jaren. You have a chance to play the 4 alongside other guys. Number 3 option, excuse me, because I used Bane in that example. Bane, Smart, Williams, G.G., Jaren. G.G.'s your 3rd option. He can play the 4, and he can do a variety of things as a rebounder and getting out in space and running transition opportunities that Memphis is always going to be interested in, regardless of how efficient or inefficient their offense is at any given time. So GG showing growth as a rebounder in addition to his point of attack defense, his ability to switch. That all makes me excited for GG as a member of the Grizzlies. And don't get it twisted. Don't take away these comments and think, Joe hates GG Jackson. I don't. Again, I think GG could be the 6th man. DeMichael is not as far along on my view of GG's potential on a winning team as I am. So go yell at him. Don't yell at me. We just both agree that GG needs to be a better passer. He's improved as a defender. He's improved as a rebounder, and we saw that in the game against the Mavs on Monday night. We need to see that passing, and I'm going to keep harping on it because in order for him to take that next step into starting for a team that's trying to contend for a championship, you have to add offensive efficiency, not lend yourself to offensive inefficiency. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this episode. Shams Charania of The Athletic talking about Memphis trying to move on from Ziaire Williams. I'll talk about why that makes sense, even if they have to part with some draft capital. Stick around for that. But first, I want to remind you of Locked On Sports Today, the first of its kind 24/7 streaming channel over on YouTube. It's also part of Amazon Fire under the free TV channels app. Anything that you could want from a sports network without the screaming, Great analysis of all the top teams and all the top goings on around the sports world. Check out Locked On Sports Today. It's tremendous. Do so as soon as this episode's over. Go check it out. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want sports to stop. But as the playoffs end, right, we're in the all-star break here, all-star games tonight. That's going to be over. Wednesday is one of the slowest sports days in the entire year. We get fewer games, and sports aren't sportsing like you and I probably want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime that I am in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone each and every day, all summer long. So what are you waiting for? Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the good folks over at Major League Baseball. Check them out once the episode's over for sure. We'll close out this Tuesday edition of the show talking Ziaire Williams and potential trade possibilities. Stick around. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, flying solo once again. No to Michael Cole. He'll be back with us tomorrow. He'll close out the week with you on Friday while I'm away on a little mini vacay with the fam. Happy to have you with me on this show. Hopefully you're not too mad at me about my GG Jackson takes. I am high on GG. I want to see him ascend. I want to see him get to the level that I perceive him as, not just as a sixth man, but as someone that can become a de facto starter for this team down the road. Very high on Scotty Pippen Jr., Jake LaRavia. Maybe they're done with Summer League. Maybe Zach Edey's done with Summer League. Cam Spencer rolls his ankle. I jokingly said on X, at Joe Mullinax, see ya in the fall, Cam. See ya in October. Hopefully he plays again, but you never know with the way the Grizzlies are so cautious with their injuries. Someone else, who may never play for the Memphis Grizzlies again is Ziaire Williams. It has been reported by Shams Charania of The Athletic that Ziaire Williams is actively being shopped by the Memphis Grizzlies. I have a sneaky suspicion this is happening at Summer League as we speak. And I feel like it's important to point out that one of the biggest challenges of being a trade machine fan is you want to say, oh, Ziaire Williams, a former number 10 overall pick in the NBA draft. Give him to the Detroit Pistons. Give him to the Charlotte Hornets. They're going to want a raw talent to develop. Thanks for the second-round picks, guys. Bye-bye. Not how it works. Not how it works. Ziaire Williams, at this stage of the game, is probably going to require Memphis giving up some draft capital if they truly want to move on from him. And here's why. If Ziaire can't find time in this rotation, one that includes multiple second-round picks, like a GG Jackson, like a Vince Williams Jr., Asante Aldamba, if a lottery player, talent-wise, cannot get on the court in those situations, well, a Detroit Pistons or a Charlotte Hornets, a Washington Wizards, a team that isn't aspiring to compete too much this coming season, might want to take a stab. They are not going to give up the draft capital to acquire a player that can't play in Memphis. They are not going to give up, potentially, the roster spot, depending on how those rebuilding franchises are planning on going about that process. And they are most certainly not as interested in trying to re-sign this person who's heading into a final year in his deal. They are not interested in doing that ahead of the game, and you might be wasting a roster spot on someone and not taking advantage of another situation down the road around the trade deadline or something like that to get an asset to take on salary to send out someone else. It limits your flexibility. And these rebuilding teams are not necessarily interested in that. So if they're going to take on somebody like Ziaire, they have to find redeeming qualities. And I'll wait, dear listener, dear viewer. What are those redeeming qualities? Potential, his size as a true perimeter player. How much have we seen that realized? The answer is not much at all. Now, I do think the best argument for moving on and somebody taking a swing at Ziaire is Ziaire Williams' game. Michael and I have talked about this often. In our opinion, he's a strong mid-range guy. His numbers have always been decent to good in the mid-range, but that is not what the Memphis Grizzlies are trying to do offensively. They're trying to get to the bucket or they're trying to shoot threes. Ziaire Williams, flashes of strength getting to the bucket, but not what he's best at. And he's certainly not best as a three-point shooter. So it's kind of a square peg, round hole kind of fit when it comes to Ziaire. If you are a rebuilding team, can you talk yourself into that thought process? Probably, but it's going to cost the Memphis Grizzlies to test that theory. How much is Memphis willing to pay to open up that roster spot? I would argue not much, because you have Scotty Pippen Jr. on a two-way deal that allows for you to play him up. I believe it's 50 games of the 82. You don't have to rush to get him on a full contract deal. And Derrick Rose's contract will expire, and hopefully Scotty Pippen Jr. slides right into that role, no fuss, no muss, over the next couple of years. You do not, if you are Memphis, want to put yourself in a position where you are overpaying to open up a roster spot that you don't necessarily need. If Luke Kennard returns and they are at 15 contracts on the roster, plus their two-way players, barring an unforeseen major trade, who's cracking the rotation? Nobody. John Morant, Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey as your starters. Let's assume that's the 5. Let's assume Luke Kennard resigns. Luke Kennard, Vince Williams Jr., Brandon Clark. You've got 8 dudes right there. You're looking for one more. If you say Santi Aldama and G.G. Jackson to round it up and make it a 10-man rotation, okay. Ziaire Williams isn't in it. Jake LaRavia isn't in it. In that moment, Scotty Pippen Jr. is not in it. So Ziaire can go quietly into the Memphis night. If there is not a deal that is advantageous to Zach Kleiman, if there's not something that makes sense in terms of generating a traded player exception or whatever the case might be, if that's not there, Memphis doesn't have to force their hand because they don't need anything else. They might want something else. They might want another big. Maybe an injury happens and they need another big. That is where the roster is most thin, and it would make sense for a peripheral move, Ziaire and 2 second-round picks for a 5th big. But again, you are paying someone else to take on the $6 million cap hit. You are paying somebody else to take on the risk of re-signing this guy and him not actually being an NBA player that will contribute, again, key phrase here, to winning basketball. So Shams reporting that Ziaire is on the trade block. That's not surprising at all. Michael and I have talked about that. But what has to be surprising to Memphis is just how poorly that pick has gone. Trey Murphy III was there. They traded up, and again, people will say Franz Wagner, or they'll say Josh Giddey. Thank goodness that didn't work out, right? Maybe there were other names that Memphis wanted at 10, and they were gone, and they just went with Ziaire as the next guy on their board. That pick has failed. And you've made it right with G.G. Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. You found other pieces to right that wrong of a missed pick. But at the same time, in order to fully erase that mistake, it's going to come with cost. The opportunity cost of lost draft capital and how you are going to accommodate whatever return you do get, depending on the draft picks you're willing to give up. So do I think Ziaire Williams will be on the roster opening night? I'm leaning towards no. But would I be surprised if he's there just kind of hanging out and riding out the rent of his contract because Zach Kleiman doesn't like to waste resources? No, I wouldn't be surprised at all. That's it for this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on this Tuesday. It is much appreciated. Make sure you're subscribing. Make sure you're becoming an everydayer to the podcast. Check us out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can check out Locked On Grizzlies. As this episode ends, go check out Locked On NBA. Go check out Locked On Sports Today. Go engulf yourself in the Locked On Podcast Network. It is a lot of fun and a lot of great content from a lot of great podcast hosts. We're proud to be a part of that network. Again, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for letting me complain a little bit about a 2-0 Summer League team that's dominating people in Vegas. I just think there's opportunities that could be taken advantage of, whether it's G.G. Jackson passing, Zach Edey playing at all. Am I overreacting? It sounds like people think I am. I'm more focused on the opportunity than I am the record. I am what I am, and that's all that I am, dear listener, dear viewer, and I'm going to continue to be that on our Wednesday edition of the podcast. Thank you again, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, wherever you get podcasts, we are free and available. Become an everydayer. To do so, you're going to have to come back tomorrow. I'll see you then.